Hello and welcome to the Daily Forex Report for December 13th. We are looking at the pound US dollar pair first. It's created a swing trade opportunity. You can see that it has a higher high than the bar before it and after it, and lower lows as well from the middle bar. We draw our trend line off of the lows here, right here and here. Look for a break to the downside and look to go short from that point. Putting a stop loss about 60 pips up right above this previous bar's high. Then looking for it to come down to this area of support that we've identified, which should be about 55 to 60 pips to the downside as well. So roughly a 1-to-1. If it gets down to that point, you can definitely go to break even and see if it'll push on lower right down to the 1,600 mark. So that is what we're looking for basically for this sideways action. If it's going to continue and not push higher, we could see it drop down to that point. Just be aware that there is a longer term trend line that could cut right in the middle here. So if you get about 30-40 pips in this and it starts to reverse, definitely go to break even so that you're not risking this full 60 on this play. But if we get a drop like we did today and it continues down, this very well could be a trade that grabs 60 to up to 100 pips to the downside. Okay, let's talk about news announcements. We do have some significant news announcements. The Eurozone's releasing their consumer price index for November at 5 a.m. Eastern. Consensus on that is that it's going to hold at 2.2%. Then at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, we have the consumer price index for the U.S. being released for November's numbers. They're showing a slight drop from 2.2% down to 1.9%, which of course would be good news for the U.S., showing that inflation is not, not an issue at this time. We also have a little bit later in the day at 9:15 a.m. Eastern, we have the U.S. industrial products for November being released. They're showing a slight increase from a negative 0.4% up to 0.3%. Okay, well, as far as our ranges go, let's jump over to the U.S.-Japanese yen pair, take a look at it. It's broken through pretty much a triple top that was created here. Closed higher, moved higher the next day. Probably will see it continue in that direction. How far, not exactly sure. We are about 30 pips away from the 84.00 level, so we could see some resistance come into the market at that point. Also look for resistance around the 34.75 mark. Look for some support around 83.15 if we get a reversal to the downside. Now the Euro USD pair been moving higher all week, closed up, but had definitely a full movement, full range day in both directions. Has not broken through this area of resistance. Look for it to, however, to potentially go as high and hit some resistance around 131.25, possibly moving down, hitting support around 129.75. Now the pound US dollar pair, we talked about it, but we are looking from a range perspective, potentially going as high as 160.96, possibly as low as 160.45. Look for some resistance around 161.75 and look for some support around 160.75. The US Swiss broke through and closed below previous support. Look for it to head on down in that direction, possibly as low as 0.9200. Look for some potential for it to move as high as 0.9306. Look for some resistance to the upside around 0.9275 and look for some support around 0.9200 there. Well, that pretty much wraps us up for today. Until next time, this is Jason Fielder. Good trading.